Serious. Nurses, hospital workers of Reddit, what is the most paranormal weirdest thing you have ever experienced while working? I work midnights in a long-term care facility as a nurse's assistant. I have 2 men under my care, and both of them are unable to use their call lights. They have severe dementia and debilitating Parkinson's disease, but still, their lights are looped around their bed rail. One night, their light came on and I went to answer it already confused and creeped out. I turned it off and left the room. Before I could get 2 doors up, the light came back on. I went in there and both lights were unplugged from the wall and thrown under their beds. I fished them out, plugged them back in and left. I've seen shadows standing over the dying and felt a tap on my shoulder while doing chest compressions, so I knew that lady had passed. I'm not a believer, but some of those things can't be explained. This was when I was still training to be a CNA, certified nursing assistant, at our local community college. Now, we had these regular non-horrifying mannequins we used for all the dressing, bathing and bed-making practice. They even had ERR, attachments for catheters. But we didn't store all the equipment in the classroom, there was a small back room that was locked off that we had to get some stuff out of one day. I volunteered to go grab it, some clothes for the mannequins I think, and when I unlocked the door, it was pitch black inside. It was like the room sucked out some of the light coming in the room. When I flicked on the ceiling light, before me, on a ragged old stretcher, lay the most inhuman, terrifying-looking freaking mannequin I have ever seen. I don't know what these manufacturers use for a reference when they're making the face, but they can't be human. It was so twisted and looked like it was in agony. Heck dude, this thing looked like it was in pain. Fleabing creepy. Anyway, I grabbed the stuff our teacher wanted, and when I took a look back, I could see one of its plastic eyelids close and open. Freaked me the flurbo out. Didn't go in that room again for the rest of the course. Nurse here. I worked night shift when a ward patient's relative came running to the nurse's station in a panic. "Nurse. Come quick," she cried. "What happened? You have to see it for yourself." I ran to the ward when this little old lady patient was crying and holding onto the bed for dear life. Her bed was shaking. Now, you're probably thinking that the lady was the one causing all that shaking. But she was this frail, practically emaciated thing. She couldn't have barely rattled the bed rails. The ward had only 2 other patients in it and their respective watchers. Everyone was huddled in a corner, shaking in fright. Apparently that particularly ward was seldom used, and the bed that old lady lay in was rarely occupied. People who have laid in it complained of nightmares where they hear screams and laughter of angry children. I guess some restless spirit called dibs on that particular bed. This might get buried and is not really nurse-related, other than the fact my grandmother's nurses told me. My great-grandmother was 94 and just started suffering with dementia. She told the home nurses and I that there was a little boy in the corner of the living room who would taunt and tease my great-grandmother while laughing at her, telling her she was going to die. Well, at first it was a little disturbing, and we all shrugged it off because of her dementia. But then things got real when my best friend came over with his little boy who is about 3 or 4. The little guy pointed over to the same corner and yelled, "I'm going to beat you up." When we asked him what that was about, he told us that he saw another little boy in the corner and he is not nice. We flipped the fleab out. I got shivers just typing this. Maybe Nana wasn't hallucinating. Psychiatric RN here. I worked in an acute care adult unit but was sent to work with the kids one evening shift. It was after 10 p.m., all patients were in their rooms and in bed. I heard a child screaming and a psych tech trying to calm him. I ran to the room, the 7-year-old boy was hysterical. He was crying, sweating, and shaking. He said he saw something. After he settled down, he told me that he saw a white man with gray hair in a hospital gown in his room. While we discussed what he saw, the child froze in fear, tears rolling down his face. He said, "Ms. My name, be still. Oh my God, he's right behind you." We decided to address the man and tell him that the little boy was scared. The boy said the man turned around and left after that. The only thing anyone in the unit would have heard was the boy screaming at the beginning. All other discussion was in his room and quiet. Not even 3 minutes later, a 17-year-old male at the end of the hall started screaming. I ran to his room. He was standing on his bed trying to get away from a white man in a hospital gown. My town has 2 really old hospitals. One no longer functions as overnight, and the stories are unsettling. No one cleans the old ER alone because all the lights and call bells go off. On other floors there's a kid with his ball, a lady in a white dress, etc. A coworker was cleaning an entire floor utterly solo, the norm, and bounced between rooms because the cleaning solution stays wet for a few min. Upon returning to a freshly wiped bed, handprints were clearly visible. I worked overnight security in one of the largest, best, and oldest hospitals in the US. My fellow security officers and I all have stories about one building in particular, but the one that I'll tell is the one that happened to me. Backstory for this building. Built in the late 1800s, it was the original psychiatric building for this hospital. Now being the late 1800s, not much was truly known about psychiatric disorders. On top of that, this hospital was known for its medical research. With both of those facts combined, you can infer that some terrible stuff was done to some of these misunderstood psych patients in this building. A couple years before I started working security there, this building had been converted into offices after the newly built part of the hospital dedicated a section for an updated psych ward. My story. My rounds for that night happened to include said building. At night this building was empty due to recently being converted into offices and the drones who worked there wanting to leave promptly at 1700, if not earlier. In some of their haste, they left their office doors unlocked, which is a big no-no due to medical information being located in their offices. It was our duty to go to each floor and make sure every door was locked, and if it wasn't, to secure it ourselves. I did my initial sweep of the building to make sure it was clear, nobody in the building, and proceeded to do my door checks. The hallways were pretty narrow, so I could check both sides of the hallway's doors at once. At the end of this hallway, there was 2 sets of doors you had to go through to reach the final office, which was a dead end. Everything was secure. Awesome. Time for the next floor. I exited the 2 sets of doors from the dead end office and stood absolutely frozen from what I saw. Every door ajar. Set perfectly so their own weight wouldn't cause them to shut again. And one wheelchair at the end of said hallway, facing towards the steps. I had heard other security officers outright reject that set of rounds due to strange stuff happening there, but I laughed it off until that night happened. Never took those rounds again. Fellow security officer had rounds in the aforementioned psych building. Heard a call on the radio, in what could only be described as dry throat terror voice, for one officer for backup. I was close, so I responded to his call letting him know I was on the way. When I got there, he had his head between his knees and was silently crying with a shattered chandelier a couple feet next to him. Now, before I had experienced the abnormal happenings in this building, I would have written off his testimony off as idiocy. But he claimed that something held him in that spot as the chandelier started swinging wildly until it started to fall. When it started to fall, he was let go and allowed to move and scrambled out of the way before it hit him. Got him up, calmed him down, and took him back to the supervisor. She yelled to one of our other supervisors, almost lost another one and insert building name here. The other supervisor laughed and said, "Why do you think we send the new guys? Haha, you know I don't even like going over there. That guy is my roommate and hates when I bring up that experience." I have a couple stories, one from my mother and one from me. My mother's is probably the most creepiest and has always stuck with me. Especially with all the paranormal stuff she has seen. My mom worked night shift at the hospital in Arizona, in a town by the border, and go figure. Old mining town. Well anyways, she's working her night shift going room to room when an old lady who walked the halls due to insomnia told her some weird goat man kept trying to get in through the doors. My mom didn't think anything of it, but she is Catholic and had those moments of silently praying to herself. After a few moments, there was a shriek, she couldn't explain it, but that it was a horrible shriek that made your red vital fluid turn to ice. She then went to the nurse's station to ask if anyone else heard that, in which they did. Come to realize that shriek was heard all around the hospital. Freaking everyone out, especially paranormal religious ladies and men. A few of them go to look out the windows and see hoof marks by the doors and windows, and the marks had no trail towards or away from the building. My story was pretty creepy. I too became a CNA and worked a lockdown dementia and Alzheimer unit at night. I've had creepy moments. But this one will always stick with me. I was finishing up my binders when a light goes off out of the hall, so I took it, punched my code in and went out since the other CNA was busy with someone else. I go in, ask if everything is okay. Sleepily, my little lady tells me there's a darn woman who keeps knocking on her window wanting to come in and that she really wants to go back to sleep. She insists I go and let her in, and I'm thinking to myself, oh no, this sounds all too familiar. I reassure her, peek out the window, nothing. Maybe she was dreaming and really tired and mistook it as her roommate. After that incident, I head back into my unit. Sit, eat a snack, chat with my head nurse, talk with my usual insomniacs, mind you, it's around 3ish am now. Light goes off, and in my unit. Also, this unit has no outbound lines at all. I head down to her hall and ask if all is okay. My lady says she can't sleep, someone keeps banging on her window, and she is scared. I pretty much about crapped myself at this point. I again reassure my lady, thinking, what just happened? I tell my nurse and she laughs and said, this has been happening for years. Great. CNA here, have been working night shift at hospitals for 7 years now, and I have quite a few stories. Came into work one night and Jen, one of the nurses, told me and my other coworker Jay, the creepiest thing happened a few hours earlier. A patient had passed in one of the rooms abruptly. The room was cleaned and was quickly occupied by another patient who had coded, was pronounced dead, but was resuscitated. Soon after being admitted in his room, he complained to the nurse, I can't be in here. This man won't stop looking at me. He's really worried about his dog. His dog doesn't know that he's dead. She had assumed he was just seeing things and said, oh yeah? What does he look like? He described the deceased patient perfectly. I could see the chills running down her spine as she was telling us the story. Turns out, the man did have a dog as well. The new admit was moved to another room. Jay said, I don't believe in ghosts. Those aren't real. I wanna see it. Tonight I'm gonna provoke it so it can show itself. 3 a.m. rolls around and all three of us are at the nursing station. Jay starts playing YouTube videos of various puppy sounds. Soon after, 2 lift team guys come up, we forget what we're doing and start another conversation. Suddenly, we all hear it, except for Jay. A dog bark. In the same room. Loudly, clear as ever. The lift team guys say, does someone have a dog in here? Jen and I simultaneously soiled ourselves. Worked at a hospital doing transport for a couple of years. The transport home base was in the basement of the hospital, where all the laundry is done, and supplies are also sorted there. I hated working late nights after this incident. On this particular night, I was the only one in the basement when I heard whistling at the end of the hallway by the elevator. I poked my head around the corner expecting to see my only coworker on duty that night, but there was absolutely no one there. I shrugged it off, I'm not easily spooked. Nights are slow, so I ate some snacks and hung out in the break room for a bit. Next thing I know, I hear a loud bang. I walked into the hallway and a bed is rolling down the hall bumping into the sides. At this point, I think that my coworker is bull-fleebing me. I radio him and he says he's upstairs in the cafeteria. I still don't believe him and think I'll catch him in the act. I walk past the laundry room and the machines start. Pop my head in there expecting to find him, but it's completely empty. Okay. Starting to get a little nervous. I walk into the laundry room and the machines completely stop. I freeze, then run out and head towards the elevator when I hear whistling again. At this point, I know I am the only worker in the basement. As I am standing there waiting for the elevator, things start falling off of the shelves down the hall. Boxes of gloves, tissues, packages of tubes. I am literally standing there watching them fall off one by one at the opposite end of the hallway. I kid you not, my entire body broke out in goosebumps, my hair stood on end, and I had this strong gut feeling I was being watched. I was not alone. As I'm getting into the elevator, I feel what feels like someone brushing my arm. Went upstairs and found my coworker in the cafeteria, freaked out to him. I got the flurbo out of there and transferred soon after that. The creepy thing to add to it is that I usually whistle mindlessly to myself at work, it was almost as if the spirit was mimicking me. Creepiest feeling ever.